Hello and welcome back to How to Be a Terminal Pro. This is Jesse Shaw, and in this video we'll be discussing creating files, copying, moving, and creating some symbolic links. Okay, so let's get started by opening up the terminal here. So we can create a file by using the command touch. So we'll just touch super important file because we'll use this for a future example. Whenever I ls, I see I have my super important file there. We can also use the command nano, which is an editor. And we'll go into more depth in this, but just know that you can create files using the editor. So I see Control X will let me exit. So I'll do Control X and hitting yes to write a file. We can also create directories by using the command mkdir, which is short for make directory. So a dir. And we can create files within directories by using touch, but just specifying the path here. So I can say touch a dir another file. So whenever we ls a dir, it shows me another file within there. Okay, we can copy files using the command cp. So let's see what we're working with. Yeah, I have a file here. So let's say I want to copy that to something else. I can say cp a file to a file.bak. This is a nice convention for working with important files. So whenever you start editing configuration files and things like that, I always make a copy of it first because you never know what can go wrong. Whenever you start working with files in the terminal, it just assumes that you know what you're doing. So if you were to copy a file and you wanted to name it super important file, but you didn't know that super important file was already in there, it'll just overwrite super important file. So that is not good. Just be very careful about that. Okay, we can also copy directories. So let's see, I have a dir here. So I can say copy a dir to second dir. But if I do it just like this, it's going to give me an error because there's something in a dir. So we just need to use the recursive option. So it'll copy recursively the directory a dir and all of its contents, preserving the structure into second dir. So now we'll just pass those arguments, a dir and second dir. So now we ls, I see I have second dir and I can see what's in second dir. And there I have another file. Okay, so that looks good. All right, so the next thing that we can do is move files. So let's see what we're working with again here. So I have a file, but I can move that into a dir. And let's make sure that we don't already have it in there. So we can move files by using the command mv. So you just type in mv, and then the file that you want to move, we want to move a file, and then the directory that you want to move it into. So this is a relative path, but you could also say your home directory slash a dir, and then I'll put a trailing slash there to say that I want to move it into there. We can also rename the file whenever we put it in there. So I didn't pass a second or a name to it right after here, after the trailing slash, but we can do that. So I'll say a file.bak, and then we'll put that in a dir, and then we'll just specify the name that we want it to be named. So I can say a file backup or something. Now whenever we ls a dir, I have a file backup. So it just moved a file.bak and it put it in a file-backup as that name. Likewise, we can just rename files with the mv command. So let's go into a dir where I have some files here. So if I wanted to rename a file to second file, I just use the move command. So I'm moving a file to second file. Now whenever we ls, I see I have second file, but crucially I don't have a file in there. So that's pretty cool. So let's go back here. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you is globbing, which will let us refer to a bunch of files using the star. So let's create some files here. Let's do file 1, file 2, file 3, file Jesse, and file John. So now whenever I ls, I see I have all these file 1 through 3, file Jesse, file John, and then the rest of the stuff that we created earlier. But let's say that I wanted to move all of the files that start with file and then have something following it. So that's referring to file 1 all the way through file John. And I want to put those in a dir. Well, I can use the move command. So I'll say mv file. But then I want to refer to everything. So file star. So that's matching everything that has file and then something following it. And then I want to put that in a dir. The trailing slash, and then it'll just put it in there. So I hit enter, I can ls a dir, and it shows me all of those files. And if I just list out the contents of my home directory, I see that I don't have anything starting with file and then something following it. So that's something nice to know. You can use that with cp and touch and ls and all of those other commands that we have already seen. Okay, so we can also delete files using the command rm. This is another one that you want to be super careful with. The terminal just assumes you know what you're doing. So if you delete a file, it doesn't go into the trash bin. It really just gets deleted. There's no way to get it back. So just be careful about that. Okay, so we can have a file here. And I see I have a file. And we can delete that file by using the command rm a file. And now it's gone. I can also delete directories by using the command rmdir. But if you pass an argument like a directory that is not empty to rmdir, it'll give us an error. So I think there's something in folder with 2 R's, but there wasn't, so it worked out successfully. But let's just go ahead and create the directory folder with 2 R's, and then we'll create a file in there, folder / a file. So now whenever I ls folder, it shows me a file. So if I try rmdir folder, it will give me an error. It says directory not empty. So to get around this, we just use the rm command, but use it recursively. So we'll remove recursively folder and everything that's within there. And that worked out successfully. Okay, last thing that I want to show you is symbolic links, also known as soft links and hard links. Okay, so let's say we have a file and I want to create a symbolic link to it. Well, we just do ln for link, and then we want to do -s, which means soft, and I'll explain that in just a second, and then the original file, and then the name that you want the symbolic link to be. Symlink for a file. Okay, so now we have a file and symlink for a file. So let's say that we had some content for a file. I can type in, hey there, and then write it out. And then whenever I cat a file, I see that this will be identical to cat symlink for a file. So the cat command just echoes out the contents of whatever file you pass to it. But with symbolic links, if we move or rename the original file, so let's just do that. We'll move a file to a file 2. We just renamed it. If we now cat symlink for a file, it'll be broken. So it'll say no such file or directory. Even though we do have symlink for a file, it's still just looking for a file. So symbolic links create a new file that really just point to another one. But if we do a hard link, it's just another directory entry, but it's for the same exact file. So let's just do a hard link. Well, first let's get rid of this symbolic link. And let's create a hard link. So we do that by typing in ln, but no option here. So this will be a hard link for a file 2. And then we'll say hard link for a file 2. So we can cat a file 2 to see its contents, and we can rename it. So we'll move a file 2 to a file 3. So I see I have a file 3 and hard link for a file 2, but if we cat hard link for a file 2, it'll still have the contents there, even though we renamed it. Okay, so that's pretty cool how they just come out being the same. Usually what I do is I create a symbolic link for my scripts folder. So I believe that's in my home directory, but but I want it to be a symbolic link for library/scripts. And then I just want to put that in my home directory under scripts. So now whenever I ls, I see my scripts folder there, and I can just go into it super easily. Okay, so next time we'll talk about finding files and searching for text within files. I'll see you then.